Thank you. So I would like to start by saying a huge thank you to our panelists today. We are focusing on the parent perspective of our series. Session one, which was last week, focused on the youth perspective, where we had students and alumni from an Irvine school, Portola High School, and a school counselor share the harmful effects that the model minority myth continues to have in our communities. Today, we're going to hear from panelists that are going to share with us what it's like to be an Asian American parent and how they're navigating it. And we are going to have our facilitator, Miss Amy Luna Capelli. Did I say it right? Because I said it like 3 different ways in my head. And I'm so excited to have her facilitate our conversation today. Amy, if you don't mind, I'm going to just turn it over to you to do your own introductions and then just take it from here. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you, Virginia. And actually, I know we didn't practice this before, but I think just it would be great for those in our audience on the Zoom here who weren't able to attend last week's meeting and watch that panel. Just to, if you could, Virginia, just to explain what the model minority myth is really quickly.
Sure. So the model minority myth is rooted in racism. To start out off with, it was started in the 1970s as a way to lift up the Asian American community and compare our Asian American community to other ethnicities, cultures, races, in a way that says, look, Asian Americans can do it. Why can't you? And that model minority myth continues to permeate because what they do is they use Asian Americans to say that we, through hard work, through something very special about our efforts, we are able to have these achievements here in the United States that everyone should have access to. So really continue to perpetuate this idea of like the American dream and all that. And it also clumps all of us Asian Americans together into one group. And that's assumed a group that achieves, success through money and wealth and through academic accolades, that kind of stuff. The students shared that model minority myth is very harmful because it continues to push them to be competitive within themselves, but with each other as well. They also feel a lot of pressure that if they are not performing, if they're not getting those great grades, if they're not doing everything well, that they're failing as Asian Americans. And that's also very harmful. There's also assumptions made in the school system, biases that are built into the model minority myth where educators, by mistake, see students who are achieving at high levels and assuming that everything is going great. They're fine. So there is also that, social emotional component of it and the mental health component of all these pressures that these students are feeling, but yet nowhere to share because on the surface, they look like they're doing well. But actually underneath, there's so many pressures and stresses and anxiety. And that's not even mentioning the student community that does not fit the model minority and how they feel. So in all those ways, it's extremely harmful. And I feel like as I share this with you, a lot of our parent generation probably knows exactly what that feels like. It's not new, right? I know that when I was in high school, I was experiencing those same pressures, and that was 20 years ago. And to hear that my students and our youth are still feeling that is really painful. So, the big ask from our students was help us break this cycle. And so that's part of our conversation today is what can we as the older generation do so that we are not continuing this cycle of harm that's happening to our Asian American community.
Great. Thank you so much, Virginia. That was really helpful. Yeah, and so hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, my name is Amy Luna Capelli. I'm with the Schools Committee for the Center for Asian Americans in Action. And I also am the school board president for a charter school in Aliso Viejo. I'm also a children's book writer, and I also dabble in activism in my spare time. And so I am excited for this panel. to discuss about kind of our experiences, both as growing up and how that has now influenced how we parent our children. And so I'm going to ask all of our panelists to introduce themselves and just share a little bit about themselves, where you grew up, where you went to grade school, and where you live now, and where did and do your kids go to school. And then also, if you want to share what ethnic background you have, since I know that all Asians are not one thing. It's great to know what all of your backgrounds are. So I'm just going to start off with, I grew up in the Midwest, and I'm Filipino, and I have 3 boys. I live in San Juan Capistrano, and my oldest is in college. My youngest is in 8th grade. I'll just turn it over to Dr. Priya Shah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you for Virginia for introducing us and that great definition of model minority that we're going to dig into this hour. So I'm Dr. Priya Shah, and I use she, her pronouns. I was born in Canada, but moved here at 4 months old, and I'm a Bay Area girl. I was telling everyone before we got started, like, Bay Area girl. Grew up in the East Bay, and I've been here in Orange County for 28 years now. I am a professor of ethnic studies and gender studies. I'm a parent of 2 girls, ages 16 and 14. And they were in the Placentia Yorba Linda School District. Only one is there now. I'm also an activist. I'm an activist for LGBTQ plus rights of students in K through 12 and racial justice in K through 12. So Amy and Virginia, our work really overlaps, and it's never been more necessary to do that work in our local schools. I'm really grateful for this space to talk about what we as parents can do to help our students who voiced so much pain dealing with the model minority myth, and the ways in which we might end up still kind of expressing some of those ideas as parents, and then the need to collaborate with other groups on the ground to make sure our schools are equitable for all students.
Thank you, Priya. Andy, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Andrew G., and I am the Managing Director of Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Southern California's Orange County branch office. That was a mouthful. So I lead a team of attorneys in our Orange County office. We are a civil rights, social justice, and direct legal services organization. We prioritize on monolingual API populations within Orange County to make sure that those low-income folks are getting their due representation in court. Our office focuses on housing rights, immigration rights, and also our SAFE program represents survivors of domestic violence. And one thing that we really pride ourselves on doing is reaching the community where they are. We have 7 languages within our hotlines, and we really want to create a safe space for folks to come receive their legal services. I have lived in Orange County for, over 40 years. I'm a product of Placentia Yorba Linda Unified School District. Elementary school was Glen Knoll Elementary, Bernardo Yorba Junior High, and Esperanza High School. I also went to UC Irvine for undergrad, so I'm an OC boy through and through. I currently live not too far from where I grew up. We're in East Anaheim, and my children, who are 11, 8, and 3, the 2 older ones are attending Crescent Elementary in OUSD. It's a fun district to be in right now. But we could talk more about that later. And our 3-year-old, will be there's a good probability she'll also be attending Crescent. So, Becky, your turn.
Hi, everybody. My name is Becky Nguyen. I was born in Vietnam, immigrated here when I was younger as a boat person. And I think there's a lot that has to be said about that kind of experience, but I'll save that for another day. I am a parent of a set of twin boys. They're adults now, but we went through Ocean View Elementary School District and then Huntington Beach Unified School District. As for myself, my parents never talked about the model minority. That wasn't a term, it wasn't coined for me as I was growing up in Illinois. It was expected that, hey, I did a lot to get here. I am, working to provide for our family. So you guys got to do better than me, better than the life that we had left behind to come over to the US. And so there's that kind of expectation of, no, there are many people who sacrifice for your life right now. We're expecting you to do better. And then that has a lot of pressure. It's not like, oh, look at you, you're part of the Asian group. It wasn't like that in Illinois. It was more like, you're the only Asian group here. It doesn't matter who you are. You need to get acclimated and assimilated fast. And so better pick up, the boots and start walking, start running, start doing and learning. And so that was my experience in growing up in, what is that? Champaign-Urbana, a small little university town. Not even Chicago, where we get more exposed and things like that. And so things are very different back then. And then as far as my experience as a parent of children in school, I had thought, oh, my kids could go to parochial school like the way I did back in the Midwest. Everything will be taken care of until they were diagnosed with speech delay. And lo and behold, we're like, oh no, in the parochial school, we don't provide this. You need to reach out to a public school. And so that's when I got involved, heads on. And that's when I started to experience the model minority mindset from the schools. When I speak up for my children, learning about their rights and fighting for their rights, I was called a dragon lady because I was not a typical Asian, and I got avoided, as I walked onto the school campus. What it has taught me is that you got to do this for your children, and you got to get involved. And just like Amy mentioned, that she started to get involved through life experiences. I at that time I thought, I have no choice. Nobody is speaking to me. Nobody is educating me about the idea, the IDEA, the laws. I gotta get myself up to par with that so I could speak coherently to the teachers. I got to know more about medical terms so I could speak to the doctors. So the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter what model we're following. We're here for the children. We want the best for our children. And luckily, we are going through it. And so I don't know if that's the topic of today, but that's how my experience was when I was in school.
Thank you, Becky. Thanks so much for sharing that. Yeah, and I think there is, it's really interesting because we all were kind of raised in different areas, right? With Priya up in the Bay Area, Andrew here in Orange County. I actually grew up in Chicago, went to Champaign-Urbana, so I know those places, Becky. And then Becky in a small rural area of Illinois. And I think it's interesting because here in Orange County, I think from the very kind of the beginning, you see a lot of Asians around you, but that's not necessarily true around the country, or maybe when we were growing up. So maybe if one of you wants to talk about, when was the first time that you realized that you were Asian American or not white, and what did that mean for you, and how did that kind of impact how you were in school?
I'll start, if that's okay. I think it happened really early. So I forgot to say I'm South Asian American, Indian American. And where I was growing up, there were not many people of color at all. Now it's actually, I would 50% of the San Ramon population is Indian American. But at the time, there felt like there was like 5 of us in the whole school, if that. And we were made to recognize that we were other very, very early. I remember being asked what tribe I was from, or being told to play the Indian in the Pilgrims and Indians for Thanksgiving, and still not at like kindergarten and not quite understanding, but recognizing that it meant I was something different than everybody else in the classroom. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom came out when I was in 1st grade, and I was asked if we eat monkey brains at home. And I remember being really confused and saying, oh, wait, no, my mom's vegetarian. So like, forget monkey brains, like, no meat. But I have a really sad memory of wanting to rub off my brownness when I was very, very young. Just like in the shower, like just not, I didn't even think I had the language at that time to understand what was happening. I just knew that I felt othered, even among my best friends, right? That they just didn't understand me and my family. But at that time, this is like the 80s, we didn't have a language of Asian American accessible to us at that time. So it was very much like a lonely feeling. But I ended up finding my best friend, who's still my best friend today, who's the daughter of Mexican immigrants. And so I think that we found this like commonality in being the daughters of immigrants, and that really brought us together and helped us deal with what it felt like to be different at that time. And then when I was in high school, that Asian American identity really became a powerful thing for us. And especially like with the Filipino community, we felt a lot of welcome in that community. And so I think for the first time, we didn't feel so alone. But at the same time, I love being Indian American. Like that's always been there too. So I think the 2 things can happen at the same time, that at school you feel othered, but at home you're so happy with your community. I loved my community in the Bay Area. And so it's a kind of disconnected upbringing in a sense, like being so proud of who you are and who your family is, but also recognizing that you don't quite fit in at a time when you want to fit in.
Right. And either Priya, you can answer this, or Andrew or Becky. That experience, I think, is something that I certainly resonates with me, of having being one way in school and another way at home, and how that impacts my parenting, is to try and make that one, right? My goal is to make that one. Can you maybe talk about, Becky, Andrew, Priya, like how your experience growing up, because I saw some nods there, Becky, with what Priya was saying, and maybe Andrew, you had a different experience because you were here in Orange County, but maybe talk about how that has impacted your growing up, has impacted how you parent your children now.
I could go. It was very unique for me, in that there's a high expectation for all of us children. But then on the flip side, as I was going through the challenges of raising first twins, my only twins, And then second, to see that they have some challenges that needed extra efforts from teachers. And not all teachers, I'm sorry, Virginia, but not all teachers are in it to care for your children. And so this is where, as parents, I learned, I have to learn, I have to do something for the children. And so the upbringing that I was expected to be a certain way completely got wiped out with my children. Because from there, it was just like, okay, I needed just to see where they're at. I needed to change everything that I had experienced growing up to make it right for the children. So definitely it did that, what is that, 360 or whatever that is, turnaround, simply because of the need, the want to make it better for the children, you know, for my own children.
Andrew, looked like you had something to add.
Yeah, hopefully I can stay relevant. So we immigrated, and you know, way back in the day in the 70s, there were actually quite a few white folks in Garden Grove, and so we were living in a little apartment with 3 of our relatives' families. And you know, when you're living in a very impacted household, I think things, you know, feel very Korean immigrant normal, right? Everything seems normal, and then the first day of school is exactly when you realize, my goodness, right? This is not home. And geez, I was 5, and I remember it like yesterday, just crying so much, just feeling so out of place, to the point where they had to call mom to pick me up, and she had to leave work. And you know, wanted a hug from mom, wanted some reassurance, but she was frustrated because she, you know, we had to make ends meet. And it was reoccurring for us. We moved to Anaheim, close to Yorba Linda, and our family, when we headed to Yorba Linda, we're the first Korean family there. Like, this was early 70s, and so a lot of your friends don't even know what Korean was. They just think it's a war, right? And just the being deathly scared of inviting friends over because you don't want them to smell kimchi or like garlic. Just the feeling of, I just need to hide who I am and just try to acculturate as much as possible. And you know, what really did make it difficult was mom and dad refused to talk about it. Maybe one conversation was, you know, we're not them, you'll never be them, right? But you just have to deal with it, right? And when you fill in the blanks, it's, you know, both my parents are North Korean. They grew up and lost so many family members. They ran down, you know, they, you know, fled down to South Korea to you know, just to survive. And so from their perspective, everything is like, everything in America is gravy. Like, we could endure some racism, whatever, you know, people threw rocks at our car windows and broke them. Like, that's nothing, right? Like, we stared death in the face. So I think part of it was just, hey, we're not them, but this is so much better than we had. And so, as much as I understand that now, as a child, it was really confusing, right? The moments of anger, to, you know, when a white neighbor would come up and yell at my dad, right? The moment of anger, saying like, no, we got to yell back, even as a young kid, but we never did, right? So that feeling of being different was early, often, and it definitely influences the way that I, you know, see my county. I love my county, but I'm really, really aware of all of our weaknesses here. But definitely it impacts the way that I view our county and the way that I parent my own children. So.
If I could jump in on how it helps us with our kids, or how this has impacted our kids. First of all, Becky and Andy, I love hearing your experiences. We have some strands that I think, you know, resonate with each other. And then also just the 3 of us show how different Asian American experiences are, you know, vastly different, not just because of region, but also just our migration stories. So my parents spoke English because the British had been in India And Indians now are forced in some sense to speak English. But I remember seeing my mom really try very hard to make friends with other moms at school, just kind of, even though she was probably really scared. Now I recognize, even though she spoke English, she was nervous about it. People would tell her she had a really strong accent, or, there's ways in which they made her feel like she didn't belong. And so I learned from that I have the privilege of not having those challenges that she did. I grew up here. I'm very confident in my ability to engage with administration. My parents would have never questioned a teacher. Like, that would have never happened, right? Forget a principal or anyone else. But like Becky, I was forced to advocate for my children. And I learned really quickly that people don't want to see Asian American women speak up, especially in places like Yorba Linda. And they want us to play the model minority role and pretty much be silent. It's basically like, you're lucky you're here. You're lucky we let you be here and we let your children be here. And very quickly, I recognized that all of the desire to be liked or be, to kind of like your way into helping your children isn't going to work. Those kind of old tactics of the model minority, like play along or speak up, but in a sad, in a quiet way. No, we need to speak for our children, especially at a time when they are under attack directly. And so really unlearning a lot of those unspoken rules. I think, and Andy, I'd love to hear if it was the same for you. I think, Becky, maybe for us, these kind of ideas about what Asian American women should be like, or what Asian women are like, or, really unlearning those super fast. And I was lucky to have parents who instilled in me the power of my voice and never tried. My mom was, actually, I take that back. My mom was often scared. And that's what I try not to do with my children. I think there's a lot of fear when we ask them to be silent. It's because we're scared of what will happen if they speak up. And we were raised to keep our heads down. But my father kind of taught me, no, you have to speak up for yourself. And so I'm trying to pass that on to my children too. Like, take away that fear. I have 2 girls. They have to speak up for themselves, and people aren't going to like it. And actually, that's okay.
Right. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that was mentioned in last week's panel by one of the students was giving ourselves, learning that we have the right to take space and the right to voice what it is that we want to say, and when we need help, or when we're upset with something, and trying to kind of break that aspect of the model minority myth is so important, not just for the students who said that, but for us as parents as well. So yeah, that's great. Maybe and I think you mentioned that talking about this with your parents was, well, at least Priya, it sounds like you had some great conversations. I know this was definitely was a conversation of just fit in, just fit in, do well, do your schoolwork, and all will be great, right? But unlearning those things. So maybe can you talk a little bit about some other things that the other aspect of it, which is the pressure to perform and the pressure to do well. I think, as Becky had said, that there is that coming in as an immigrant or a child of an immigrant, there is that pressure to perform because of what was given up for you to have these opportunities. And I remember, getting A's and my mom saying, well, it's not an A+. You could have gotten an A plus, right? And so it's hard to undo that as when you're parenting, but it's something that I'm trying to do with my kids. Can you talk about if you have been able to, if that is something that is in your heads as well as your parenting, where you've kind of got this push and pull of, well, wait, I was raised this way, but I don't want to continue that kind of dynamic with my own children and the pressures that come with that. Maybe Andy or Becky, any of you want to jump in with that?
Do you want to go, Becky?
Oh, go ahead.
People like listening to you more, but
Oh, I don't know
I'll try to
about
keep
that.
it short. Wow, pressure. I think any person in high school in any era, it's a pressure cooker. Any way that you slice it. And my existence was no different. There's certainly the very tangible pressure of being the youngest, and having a sister who was valedictorian. She set a very low standard for me. To this day, I know you did it just to spite me, just to make me look bad. But there was always that pressure of from mom and dad again, and it was rooted in, if you're going to succeed here, look at our lives, look how hard it is because we can't speak, look how hard it is we have to sacrifice good careers in Korea, or the promise of good career, to come here and work jobs that we would have scoffed at in the past. So you do your best, you learn your English, right? You get your degrees, so you're not like us. This is kind of what Becky had said. And me being conflicted, meaning that was one side of pressure from home. And then you're a high schooler and you're navigating how you're basically the only Korean kid. And it's like, where do you fit in, right? And part of you wants to fit in, and there's a huge side of you just wants to be invisible, right? Because again, you don't like what you see in the mirror, you don't like what's at home. So there's this pressure to fit in, but also this pressure to hide and then to be high achieving. And it was just so conflicting, I remember, at that time. And you play it off with humor, right? You try to become the class clown, try to like really exacerbate the differences and say I'm kind of cool with it, but inside you just felt so alone, right? And that pressure sometimes can have a really isolating feeling to it. And when I look at my kids, my oldest, he's super high achieving, but he's super quiet, right? And again, I'm not exactly sure if I could always connect with him because we are different people, right? But what I try to provide for my kids is that outlet, right? To speak about reality, speak about differences, speak about our county, what I went through, right? And I'm not naturally someone who likes to reach out and connect all the time, but I definitely feel like I owe it to my kids to engage constantly, because I don't want them to withdraw. I don't want them to face those same challenges and say like, you know what, I'm just going to hide and hide behind the mask of being high achieving, I'm just going to hide behind my A's, and I'm not going to really voice, what I feel inside. And that is the one thing that I can't have with kids, right? I want them to have their voice. I want them to discover it, right? And to be seen, right? So it's just kind of just diametrically opposed to what I had grown up. So anyway, sorry, Becky, you can take it.
Oh
back.
no, I think very much. I was thinking as you were talking, I was thinking about my parents. I was thinking back to the time that I had to tell my parents, no, I'm not going to be a bio major. No, I'm not going to be a doctor, nor an attorney. Andy will cover that. I'm not just kidding. Nor an attorney. No, I have to figure out my strength, and it was very hard. And it was interesting in that when my son, who was encouraged to be engineers, especially to follow dad's footsteps, having to come to me and really having to work up the courage and say, Mom, I'm going to have to tell dad, but I want to tell you first, I'm not going to be an engineer. Are you okay with that? And it really made me think that even though I try not to put any kind of pressure on my children, really emphasizing on happiness and doing the best you can, and as long as you're making comparing yourself to yesterday, making it better, then that's okay. But what I realized is that my parents, all the aunts and uncles, and all the other nieces and nephews of mine were putting that pressure on them and pressure on each other, because they were all being pushed and being pressured to do to meet certain expectations that we thought we had disrupted, but it didn't get disrupted. And so again, it was just reminding us that we needed the whole community to support each other. We needed this community to build this network to make it safe for our children. Unfortunately, when I was hearing my son say, "I'm not going to be an engineer," one of them, it was hard. It was really hard. And I thought, oh, back then I had that conversation with my parents too, but it wasn't as hard because I was a girl. I was expected to do certain things, but then I also am expected to be a housewife kind of thing as well. And Dr. Priya is smiling because I think we have the conversation at home like that, right? So it's all this mixed messaging that I had when I was growing up, that boys don't need to do, household chores. But then for the girls, it's like, you have to do household chores plus. And so it was very interesting just to see that even though I had made, and my husband had made the concerted effort not to put that pressure, knowing where our sons are at, but then all around them have exerted that pressure, and they themselves absorb that and make it really hard on themselves.
Oh, Priya, you are muted. But before you go, I just want to, I'll love to hear your comment, and then we're going to turn it over to Q&A as we're.
Yeah, I can hold back. I think let's go ahead and go to Q&A. I just wanted to say, Becky, the community aspect is really key. And sometimes we think we're being disruptive, yet our community is sending different messages to our children. So we just kind of need to be, or we are sending messages without realizing it.
Exactly.
Yep, for sure.
And okay, so there is a question in the chat here, asking if and maybe Diane, you want to ask it. I don't know if we can unmute.
Yeah, you can unmute. You
Okay,
can hear
there you
me. Thanks, Amy. I think I direct messaged it to you, so the broader group probably can't see it, but I think Dr. Shaw was kind of alluding toward it already. Whereas, like, one common theme I've been hearing a lot from our speakers is the word sacrifice. And I heard that a lot growing up as an immigrant child, is like, we sacrifice to come here. And a lot of that pressure, aside from just being the model minority, is like, I have to make my parents proud because they sacrifice so much. And so as parents today, knowing that, I'm just curious to know, like, what does sacrifice still mean to you? Is that still applicable? Is that some, like, the pressure that we're still, like, it's almost like generational trauma, like passing on to our children?
Diane, that's such a good question. And Diane's amazing. She is, we're in an Asian American Studies class together. So she's incredible. And that's an incredible question. I realized I had internalized the sacrificial mother kind of trope in my head. And that was something I really have had to work on in therapy for a really long time to not pass on that trauma to my daughters, because I realized that martyrdom that my mother embodied, and I saw many, many other Indian mothers embody, is not a productive relationship to have with yourself or with your children, because it hinges on guilt and resentment, unfortunately. I've had to learn not to be a martyr and not to expect perfection from myself in this kind of like Indian idea of a mother. But it's caused some real difficult conversations with my own mother because I love her and I'm so grateful for her love, but I don't want to parent like her. And that has been a really difficult journey for the both of us.
That is, so I'm seeing yes in the chat. For sure. For sure. There is that, those discussions with our parents is, I am fortunate to have both my parents still alive and interacting with my children when they come to visit for months at a time. And so navigating that of their expectations that they used to have on me and how that translates to their grandparents. And it looks like Andrew's ready to talk about that piece of it because that certainly is something that I have to deal with as well. And if maybe Andrew or Becky, if you have something to add on, maybe that community aspect or dealing with family expectations and how you advocate for your children because you know differently.
Sure. Diane, thank you so much for the question. It's a great question. So again, being a parent now, I could see my parents, and they weren't perfect, but they did what they could, and I can understand that, and I could tangibly see the sacrifices that they made. For me, as I internalize it, I'm someone who, I think I'm a lot more Korean male. I'd like to admit I don't like to stand up and out. I don't like to speak in public. There are times where even when I feel like I should be advocating, and this is really strange to say as a lawyer, right? I tend to shy away. I tend to become a wallflower at times. So when I hear that term sacrifice, I kind of think through this impulse just to be quiet, to say, my kids are going to be fine, right? I went through this, they'll be fine. They'll get through this and they'll grow up just fine, right? Or, you go to the school board meeting and you realize this really incenses me, right? But, people are going to say something about it, right? And for me, how sacrifice looks for me is to say, like, you know what? You don't live by yourself. You don't live in a vacuum. You don't raise your kids in a vacuum, right? You have to think about the greater whole, right? My parents were trapped. They felt like they had no voice. They're just trying to live their lives. And there were so many times where I looked towards my parents and I said, speak out, right? Like, we deserve to be here. Speak out. And they never did. And I understand why. But with that burden now, it's kind of filtered down to me to say, like, your sacrifice means even when you're uncomfortable, you got to say something. If they are ousting your superintendent when they're on vacation on a 4-3 vote, and they do it in a cowardly manner, then you show up and you shout, even when it makes you feel uncomfortable. So again, that sacrifice looks a little bit different because I am an introvert. It is harder for me. But again, when you think about not just your kids, you think about your community, how everyone is going to get trampled on, right? Then you think that's going to be my sacrifice in terms of how I perceive my life and moving forward. So anyway.
Powerful. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Does anyone have any other questions? I'm opening it up to ask any of our panelists some questions.
I think Naheem have a question. I thought I saw a hand up.
Oh, was there a hand up? Sorry. I'm just not seeing the whole screen here.
I have a question. Oh, it looks like Jen has a question. I'll let Jen ask her question.
Okay, Jen's question, and Jen, you can expound on this or if you'd like, but her question is, do you have an opinion on modern parenting advice like Iris Chen's untigering? Have any of our panelists read that book? No.
I haven't, but seeing my staff going through parenting right now, comparing to the years that I went through it, I was like, oh my gosh, you guys got it really tough. Simply because when you're going through it, you just know that, okay, one step at a time, one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other. I didn't have the luxury of sitting back and say, oh, I wanted to do it this way. I want to do it that way. It's more, no, there is this issue. I need to address it. And as much as I want to be friends with the school, with the district and school administrator, I have to know that what is my priority. And I didn't think of the word advocating, but I was just seeing the imbalance between how Asian kids are being treated, like my children, versus the non-Hispanic whites. And literally, I think one of the teacher who snuck me a little note, she said, Becky, you need to talk to. And she gave me that little note. And I'm like, who is that? And so with that, I get to learn. I learn that you need to speak up. It doesn't matter how administrators and teachers are seeing you. It's just that, what is at stake? I mean, that was it. It was just like, okay, I just need to focus. Like, what do I need to learn? And believe it or not, I quit my corporate job to be a volunteer in school, to learn, to sneakily learn what is being taught in the classroom, so I could reteach or I could reinforce it at home. And the funny thing is that teachers love the volunteering, and they would feed you a lot more information of, oh, this is how we use this is how we do this. And you need to use that word when you talk to so-and-so. So they themselves became the allies that we really need. And they became my community. And it's just very interesting, at meetings, you would see them, that those who are for you decide not to say as much. And so that, hey, you're saying something that the administrators are having to fight against. And so again, it was just simply do what you need to do for your children and build allies. You never know who's on the other side that are your allies.
Thank you, Becky. Virginia, do you want to ask? You had a question for our panelists, and then we've got just a few minutes to wrap up.
Well, Dr. Shaw, did you want to add to that answer?
Oh, I just really quickly was thinking as Becky was talking, because it sounds like we've had very parallel experiences as parents, but it's almost like being a tiger mom outside in school. Like, I never thought of it this way, but I was like a tiger mom. I'm a tiger mom in school when I have to be for my kids, but at home we do gentle parenting. And so it's like flipping the idea of tiger parenting and like using it outside to advocate, but then with the kids in a more gentle, like, I guess, loving's not the right word because all parents are loving, but a showing your affection kind of way. But let's not give up the tiger altogether. So that's what I'm saying.
Use it when you need it.
For sure. Virginia?
Yeah, I think there's tiger, to me, I joke with my family that I'm a natural tiger in the protective way, right? Like that's where my tiger comes out, is that I am so much more willing to speak out to protect others. But then when I'm advocating or trying to express how I'm feeling, I struggle. But it's so much easier for me to step out of my comfort if it means that I'm going to be speaking out for my children, for my family and friends, for my students. So in that way, I'm very much a tiger, a natural tiger. So thank you so much for sharing. I am learning so much, and too much of it is resonating with me. Like, you know, the painful parts of all of our stories of what it has been like growing up Asian American. But at the same time, I'm so proud. I'm so proud of all of the gifts that my cultural and ethnic identity and race has given me. And I want my kids to feel that pride as well. And so that's my question is how do I, you know, my kids now don't speak Vietnamese, sadly. And they don't eat a lot of Vietnamese food either. So like, you know, like some of those like beautiful moments of my childhood that come with having parents that are, you know, immigrants or refugees or, you know, first generation like that, I feel like I'm losing that. And that part of parenting for me is like this other part of being the Asian American experience that's now a new painful part, which is the loss of that cultural connection that I had. And I see it so clearly, the parts that they have that's different from me. And I'm curious how you try to hold on or navigate that part of our continued generational like divide.
You are not alone. How about that? Your children, the way that they are, I hear that from other parents. So we are not alone. We want to expose them to, and I think with today's society, we're being, how should I say it? Our culture and our different languages are being embraced more than it has been in the past. In the past, I remember I was told that you need to pick a language, you know, for your children. You need to make sure that your children could communicate in English. And so the other language would be nice to have, but you have to stick with one. And so remembering that we were told to forget our language and our culture. I think many other parents are being told the same way. In order to be successful, you need to speak English well. And so with that, just know that you're not alone. And we will, I think as a community, we will find a solution, or at least steps to a solution to embrace children who might have lost their identity, or we would consider as losing their heritage identity. That is another phase I'm hoping that as a community, we could start building and connecting. And exactly what this conversation is to bridge that. And I do see younger folks. I was just going to say children, but I'm like, wait. I better refrain that word. You know, like my staff. Some of them are very acclimated, and some of them are continue to carry that culture. And it's not because the parents have raised them up in a certain way, because I think that many of us expose our children to the same culture, but it's just that they weren't able to retain or to put that into the fabric of life a little bit more. And so I think that is something that as a community that we could start building that network a little bit, to accept the fact that they are not bilingual or bicultural, and be okay with that.
Thank you, Becky. Yeah, I think that's kind of where we need to wrap up now, is kind of what do we hope for our children. And what I'm hearing right, is certainly that the painful experiences that we had growing up, want to mitigate against those, and at the same time, just keep that pride of culture and pride of advocacy as well, to say that we belong here, and we have a space here. We are American too. And I think that I appreciate all of you for being here and sharing your experiences. And I hope that our audience who's joined us have felt the same appreciation. And I think Aaliyah, you probably have do you have a survey or something that you want to send out, or ways to talk about, want to talk about next week's session, or maybe Virginia?
Sure. Thank you, Aaliyah, for dropping the survey form in our chat. It'll also be emailed out along with our program summary. Thank you so much to our panelists today. I know that you have given me so much to think about in terms of my role as a parent, advocating for my kids, and as an individual in our community advocating for our Asian American community, and how to break this cycle of harm that continues to happen in our spaces. Thank you so much. I feel so much lighter knowing that I'm not alone in this journey. I'm so appreciative of all of you, and all of those of us that have joined, and all of those that will be watching this later. I hope we'll see you in person at our in-person event. We also have next week, we have educators speaking on Tuesday night, talking about what educators can do and how we can continue to build this coalition together. And then we're going to share space together, and of course, in true Asian style, eat together and celebrate. And we hope to see you there. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.